Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Ask TCW podcast. My name is Jono Bullard, and discussing questions sent in by you, the listeners, tonight are Paul Balm.
Hello.
Tina Taylor.
Hiya.
And it's a very welcome return to Andy Haywood.
Evening.
Right, evening all. We've got quite a few to get through, but if you would like to join in with us while we are live on air, you can do. It's via Twitter at CatsWhiskersTV. Use the hashtag AskTCW if you want to send in any questions or react to anything that we say from the questions that we've been sent in. So we will get straight onto it, and this question comes from Daryl Charlton on Twitter at DCharlton32. And he says, with a team looking low on confidence, is Brad Moran the right captain? He certainly doesn't inspire me with his reluctance to go into the corners. No doubting his hockey ability, but age doesn't make a captain. Andy, you start on that one.
I think it's quite an interesting one. I think one of the big things that, as fans, that we want is we want to see a captain who leads by example, who sort of takes the game by the scruff of the neck if it's not going so well, and sort of almost puts a team on his back and says, "Come on, lads, we're doing it this way, and this is how we're going to do it." And I think realistically, he's not that sort of player. With regards what makes a good captain, I think you've got to delve deeper into the team, and I think as fans, we will never really understand the sort of the players and his peers' respect and his leadership in the locker room. I mean, people always went on about players like Danny Myers, and obviously Jordan Fox was the big one that everyone sort of uses as the sort of yardstick. They were the type of players that, I mean, Danny Myers was very vocal, openly vocal, and sort of said what people wanted to hear. And Jordan Fox was very much that player that was going to, if things were going wrong, it was going to be up to him to sort of put it right. And, I kind of agree with what Daryl says, that age doesn't make a captain, but obviously without knowing the ins and outs of what goes on sort of behind the scenes, I don't know whether he's, if the team think he's a great captain. But obviously from a fan standpoint, it's one of them things where we like to see captains perhaps offering a bit more and being sort of leaders on the ice as well as off it.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with a lot of that. But I mean, I think for me, it depends on what the captain's role is within the team. Is he we've talked about David Clark in the past, and I think he's possibly more of a leader than Moran. But do you want somebody who gets the team up in the dressing room, or are there other people who can do that? I mean, last year we got Jansen, so Clark didn't need to do that. And I think this year I don't see that we've got anybody really doing who appears to be doing that. I mean, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, obviously, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem that there's that that ball of energy like we had last year.
Tina?
Yeah, totally agree with what's been said. I don't think Moran is a guy who has got that spark to him, and like Andy says, will sort of take the team on his shoulders and say, this is how it's going to go. He's not got anything like a presence on the ice. He's got an experienced head on his shoulders. He's played a lot of hockey, and he's a skillful guy. But yeah, he's not sort of. He's not a guy who you sort of look at to drive the team forward. I think we're possibly missing that particular guy. But I mean, I suppose to maybe turn the question around a little bit. Who else would it be? Who else on the team is captain material?
That's actually a really good thing, and I was going to bring up right at the end was the fact that at the beginning of the season, before we played a game, we were asked the question, who do you think the captain's going to be? And I know myself, and I'm fairly certain Paul, both said that Brad Moran would be the choice looking at the team on paper. And it is a great sort of point. Is who else realistically in this team that we've got would you rather have at the moment? And to be honest, I genuinely don't know either way.
Just goes to show what we know, don't it?
Yeah, fair point. I mean, from my point of view, yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you've all said. But like we say, we don't see what goes off in the locker room. So he may be a great guy to get the team up before a game. We don't know. And let's face it, no one was complaining about the captain when we was winning. But I suppose it's the mettle of a captain, whether they bring us through when times are not so good like they are at the moment. Okay, we will move on to another question. This comes from John Casey, and it refers back to Sunday's game against Belfast. It says, in reference to Belfast's fourth goal on Sunday, which was an empty net goal scored by Michael Forney, if a puck hits an official, which results in a turnover, should the official whistle play dead and have a face-off? Now, we've looked at the IIHF rulebook just to get clarity on this. And this is a direct quote from the rulebook. It says, no goal will be allowed if the puck is directly deflected into the goal net off an on-ice official, even if the puck subsequently deflects off a skater from either team or goaltender. If the puck hits an on-ice official and is subsequently put into the goal net in any legal manner, the goal will be allowed. This is what happened on Sunday. So that is the actual rule. But Tina, do you think the rule needs changing?
I think the only possible sticking point that's probably resonating with people is the fact that we had an empty net. So it obviously that makes you more vulnerable. The rule is there. Everybody, well, yeah. The rule is there. We anybody who goes looking for the IIHF rule book like we have, they will see the rule as written down. I mean, we can't speak for the Elite League rule book because as yet I'm not aware that is freely available. So we've got the only point of reference that is available to us. Does it need changing? Probably not, no, because at any other time in the game, it would have had the same level of incredulity from the crowd. But you've got to be aware where the officials are. If you are making a pass, then the officials are there for the entire game. So you have to get around them. You have to be aware of where they are, as well as the opposition and as well as your own teammates. The pass that was made itself, just referring to the game directly, I thought it was a very loose pass, and I don't think that Hogarth is at fault. Quite frankly, I think the fault was, and this is going to expose me as expose the failure in my memory cells, but I can't remember who made the pass, but I think the fault lies with them. They should have seen that the official was there and done more to ensure that puck got to a teammate rather than hitting the official and then being made available for the opposition.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, the only difference between that and a lot of passes we made on Sunday night was that it went via the referee, not straight to the opposition. For me, to be honest, I'd like to see it changed. I've said for a long time that as soon as it's the referee, it ought to, or a linesman, it ought to be whistled dead and a face off. But each to their own.
Andy,
I think unfortunately in our league, they hit the officials quite often most games. So if you're looking at changing rules, it's going to have quite a substantial impact, I think, because we'll be looking at probably one or two, maybe on some occasions 5 or 6 sort of breaks in play just for the sake that it's hit the referee and no harm done. I think the fact that a goal was scored from it is sort of why this has come up. And to be brutally honest, as much as talk about rule changes and things like that, I think realistically the Elite League in general isn't really going to be a pioneer in looking at making rule changes. Yes, we could make them to our own league, I suppose, but I think realistically the NHL and the IIHF, they're world governing bodies of the proper professionals, as it were. So I don't think we're ever going to be sort of at the forefront of, being pioneers of the game anytime soon.
Okay. Moving on to the next question, that comes from Colin Basford. We've got a few questions from Colin this week. He says, for this one, would you like to see Logan McMillan replaced? I don't agree with this, as I believe in his normal position he is a great player to have. What are our thoughts? Now, I suppose to add to this, there has been some growing noise about Logan McMillan's position in the team and how he's been doing this season, as they have with several other players in the squad. But McMillan, mentioned specifically by Colin, he wouldn't like to see him cut from the squad. So what are our thoughts? So Tina, I'll start with you.
I thought you might. Would I like to see him replaced? I would like us to have the very consistent, hard-hitting, energy Logan McMillan that we got at least in the back half of last season. I think he's not found his feet yet, and I think his lack of points is going to count against him, to be honest. That's not essentially what he really brings. I don't think he was ever going to be a top point scorer last season, and I don't think I personally expected that from him this season. But he's not quite got to the effort level, or the execution level, should I say. The effort I think is there, but the execution level of hits and his contribution to the line that he is on, I don't think he's got to that yet this season. So I wouldn't like to see him replaced per se, but if he can't get himself back to what we were looking at last season, then he may very well turn out to be one of the players that it's been sort of that various articles have been out saying that other guys could be on their way out, the same as Peter Callis was. But as it stands at the minute, we've got injuries at the moment, so cutting anybody at the moment would be absolutely bonkers. In short, I suppose, at the moment, no. Okay.
Andy?
If we can get a better replacement, then yeah, I don't see why we wouldn't, why we'd hang on to him. I think overall he's been one of, in my opinion, one of the biggest disappointments, really, because of the high standards that he set last season, and he's not really got anywhere close to that kind of play that he had last season. If like Tina said, if he turns up next week and he goes back to how he was and plays the same way as he did last season, then you could argue that no. But ultimately, we're a team that's lacking something. If we can find talent out there that's going to make our team better, and someone has to make way that currently isn't pulling their weight, then I think he probably falls into that category. And I don't think he's the only one by any stretch. There's quite a few on the team at the moment that must be looking over their shoulder and concerned about whether they're going to be in the team by sort of Christmas time, because to be honest, the results haven't been going well, and in a team like ours, it isn't good enough. So would I like to see him go? No, I'd like to see the Logan McMillan that we had last season ultimately, but if that doesn't happen and we have to make changes to sort of salvage the season, then I think he's certainly one of the ones that could well be being looked at, if not on his way.
Okay, Paul?
I think the only thing I'd say is that he's been played out of position a lot. So I'd like to maybe see him actually get a chance to play as a forward, see what happens then, because I'm told he's clearly not a defenseman, but yeah, he's got to be one of those that should be looking over their shoulders. Whether they are looking over their shoulders, I don't know, but they should be.
Okay. The next couple of questions regard the formation of a supporters trust, the first meeting of which was on Friday evening. So the first question comes from Rob Scott, who actually organised that meeting. He says, do you think a supporters trust would be beneficial for the Panthers? Tina?
Not a clue. I maybe I've missed something in the whole build up to this, but I genuinely don't know what a supporters trust is.
Fair enough. Andy?
Very much the same. And I think one of the biggest problems that we're also going to have is it will only be as good as the people that run it and the people that are interested in it are.
Okay.
But to be brutally honest, I don't really understand quite what it is, what its sort of goal is, and what the difference between that and the supporters club, for instance, and things like that. So I don't really know, to be brutally honest, but it can't be much worse than what we've already got, I suppose, can it?
Okay. Paul, we were both at the meeting, so
We were.
I suppose fill these guys in a bit with a brief summary.
Briefly, as far as I could work out, and it might be better to get Rob on at some point in the near future to talk about it, because he probably understands this a lot better than I did. But essentially, it's a group of people who enter. A supporters trust is essentially there are legal requirements on both sides. So there are requirements that the supporters trust have to abide by, and there are also legal requirements that the club have to abide by. The most important one is that they have to meet with the supporters trust twice a year.
Yeah,
I think I got that right.
That's right.
I only turned up to getting a free pen.
All right, Michael.
But I mean, moving on to the next question, which is from Antoine Marijon, about how seriously do we think the Panthers organisation will take the formation of a supporters trust? I'm doing presenting stuff now, and that's what I get for it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's one of the things that worries me about it. I could, we were talking about legal requirements. I could very easily see the Panthers calling any supporters trusts bluff.
I mean, sorry, carry on. No, I was
more or less finished. Go on.
I was going to say that. I mean, one of the things that did come out of the meeting, it was made very clear that this was something. It's not to work against the club, and it was said very clearly that if people were using this as a mudslinging exercise or to overthrow the current management, then you weren't welcome. It's not about that. The whole purpose of the supporters trust is to build a working relationship with the club so that things can be improved between the club and the fans.
Yeah, I mean, it was all about the dialogue. It's all about the dialogue about how the two sides working together can improve what happens for both sides. It's not just a case of we as the supporters, we want this, we want that, and the other. It's saying you've got this group of supporters here who not only do they want stuff, they're also in a position to provide stuff, to help you with stuff, to produce a better experience for everybody. So I personally think they'd be crazy not to listen, but then again, I've always thought that.
I mean, I must admit, I think we both said, and I think we said to Rob on the night, that we both left the meeting with far better expectations than what we had when we came into it.
That's right, and I think for me the thing is, is that set of legal requirements. It's what sets it apart from a bunch of fans who want to get together and sit and moan.
Which wasn't. I mean, that the meeting was not like that in the slightest, was it? It was very much.
But and that's how it's got to be. It's got to be positive.
Yeah.
You know, if we go to the or whoever goes to the Panthers and says, we want this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, they're going to just shut down and ignore us.
Absolutely.
It's about, excuse me. It's about creating that dialogue and a positive dialogue throughout.
Okay, Tina, Andy, anything you want to add to that?
With regards legal requirements, what legal requirements do Panthers have in that regard?
If you set out a legal supporters trust which has been democratically elected, the club are required by law to meet with you twice a year.
But who elects them? And that's what I'm failing to grasp here.
Well, who elects a supporters trust?
Is it something that the club does, or
no? It's from meeting. Yeah, so it's meeting amongst fans. Then the members of the supporters club have to buy a share, an ordinary share, for £1, and the ordinary share members will then vote for a board, and the club are legally required to meet with the board twice a year.
Okay.
Tina, anything to add?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, fair enough. If you want to get in touch with us, don't forget Cats Whiskers TV on Twitter. Use the hashtag #AskTCW. That's if you want to comment on anything we talked about so far, or if you have got any other questions for us. Okay, another question, and this one is another one from Colin Basford, and it says, is there a deeper reason for the lack of form and the lack of fluidity between the team that just doesn't hinge on missing players? Andy?
Well, there probably is. Quite what it is, I'm not entirely sure. But what I will say is the two players that we are missing in our forward ranks are players that you would expect to be scoring goals, getting plenty of points. Unfortunately, with them missing, no one's really, grabbed the bull by the horns and sort of taken over that reign. So there's going to be players that aren't, perhaps, when we signed them, weren't going to be that kind of player. So you can kind of see, players like McMillan that we've mentioned, probably Jeff Brown, I would imagine, were sort of signed with different tasks in mind than scoring points. And obviously, when you lose your two players that have been consistently, putting up points, then you need someone to sort of take over, and that's where you're looking at the likes of perhaps your Carters and your Morans and players of that ilk. And obviously, certainly in Carter's case, it's not really happened at all. And Callis would have been one of them players again. I think with Schultz being injured and Callis being available, I think that was a signing that was very much of a case of that we need someone to start putting points on the board. And obviously, it didn't happen at all really with Callis. I imagine that there is, a lack of chemistry, a lack of confidence, a lack of ideas that isn't helping the players and is a reason why the form has been so poor. But I do, genuinely, and two players don't make a team, but I do genuinely think the type of players that we're missing certainly doesn't help our cause.
Okay. Tina?
Yeah, I don't know as I've got too much to add to that. I think, like Andy says, the two players that we are missing are, who you would think would be putting our points up. And I mean, we would sort of having a look at some stats for Monday's podcast, and even now, Schultz and Lawrence are still sort of topping a lot of that. Especially in terms of points per game. I think it was Lawrence and Schultz are the top two. So there's been a definite lack of other players picking up the slack when the two guys have gone out injured, which obviously happened at similar times. We need other players to just start doing what they were signed for. There's no point relying on two guys for all our scoring. I mean, there's a lot of call for, we need a sniper. Well, we kind of had one, and he's injured. So what now? That's why I enjoy it more when we've got scoring coming from all over the team. But right now we haven't.
Okay. Paul.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the people have got to step up. I think it's not just the players. The coaching staff have got to do what they can to get the best out of what they've got left. And there's also these players. I mean, what Schultz has played? What is it? 5 games all season?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you got to wonder what's going on there, and what the club are doing. Okay, Callis was brought in, and that in the end really didn't work. But you don't necessarily know. You can't know that at the time. But it doesn't mean that just because it doesn't work once that it can't be looked at again. And we've got to look at Schultz's situation and say to ourselves, is he going to come back, and what's he going to be like when you come back? I mean, you remember Steve Roberts?
Yes.
I know we signed him, and after an excellent player, a couple of months later he got injured. Or the season-ending injury, came back.
And he just wasn't the same player.
Injured didn't he get injured in his first game back?
No, yeah. I think he came back at the start of next season, and he just wasn't the same player.
Right, I thought he came back start of the next season, got injured, and we let him go, and he just wasn't the same. But the same. Well, however it sort of panned out, the same sort of thing stands. You come to a point where you've got to make a decision. I mean, obviously the club know more, what's going on with him and Lawrence than we do, but they've got to make a decision.
Okay. Next question comes from Danny Hutchinson. It's quite a long one, but quite an interesting one. He says, is it acceptable for fans to verbally abuse their own players in the middle of a match? Various people around the front rows were singling out Dan Spang and waiting for him to get close to the glass before shouting to him he's useless and he should quit the team. Surely this is going to have a negative impact on the player and or the team, and those fans are doing more harm than anything. Andy?
I think I think probably the term verbally abusing is perhaps no, it's not the wrong word, because ultimately they're shouting negatives at a player, and it's I do kind of agree that it's going to have a negative impact and such, but I do think that there isn't a problem with showing your displeasure or your disapproval of someone if they're having a bad night or a bad month or so. It's a fine line. I do think that you've got to be careful with what you shout at players, and that comes for both your own teams and the opposition teams as well. But I think realistically, I think you're more than within your rights to let the team know how you feel at the time, and obviously there are players that people think are underperforming, and in my opinion, it's perfectly acceptable for them to vent that frustration. Saying things like get out the team and that sort of thing, then I kind of think that's probably a bit much, in the sense that it is going to have a negative impact. It's not going to particularly pick up his morale. It's not going to particularly, from a personal point of view, it's not going to make me think, I'll show him. It's going to make me think, why do I bother? And it's things like that you've got to be careful with, because you can end up alienating individuals and then the whole team because of it. So I do think you've got to be careful in what people are shouting, but I certainly think that they're perfectly within their rights to vent their displeasure or their opinions. But obviously, you just got to either tone it back a bit or just choose what you're saying a little bit more carefully, perhaps.
I mean, Tina, you sit very, very close to the away bench, so
yes,
you know all about things that get shouted and things that are said. So your opinion?
Yeah, I think Andy's pretty much right in what he's saying. There's a very fine line. Anybody who knows me knows that if I'm unhappy about something, I'm going to start yelling about it. And 9 times out of 10, the person who I want to hear it is going to hear it. Normally
when I'm stood at the bar in the bunkers.
yeah, that as well. But when we're in the arena, I love engaging in a bit of light-hearted banter with the away bench. Occasionally we get obscenities thrown back at us, and you kind of deal with that, and there's sort of uproar on occasions. But just as an example, I think it was the Edinburgh game. The first am I right in saying that was the first one after the Continental Cup?
It was
rounds. It was. I just got so downbeat about the game. I think it was somewhere close to the beginning of the third period. I shouted something along the lines of, "Are you lot still in Spain?" So it was. But I don't like singling out players, especially not my own players. I mean, there's the odd occasion that, I say the odd occasion. If there's an opposition player who's made a mess up of something, the puck's gone straight past them. They'll get a few verbals when they're coming back to the bench, and there's very often there's a player who'll come back to the bench and they'll be whacking the stick on the plexi in frustration, and you get the handbags sort of thing going on. And yeah. There is if you want to tell the team that you are unhappy with what you have paid money to come and watch, and it's not necessarily about the money. You get emotionally invested in the team, so you're unhappy. When you see the performances that we've been seeing for the past few games, you're unhappy, and it affects you. I know it affects me. There's a fine line, and you have to know when to stop. And like Andy says, if I were Dan Spang and somebody was shouting through the plexus to me saying you're useless and you should quit the team, I'd do this. I'd be like, see you then. I'll go home. See how you go without me then.
Okay, Paul.
The only thing I'd add is that the people pay their money. They can do more or less what they want as long as it's within the realms of good taste.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I will. On that theme, we've had another question from Sandra Brown that says, "Is booing the team after a poor performance acceptable?" And Paul, I'll come to you first because you wrote an article about this today. It's available on the Cat's Whiskers website, www.thecatswhiskersonline.co.uk. If you go to Paul Balm from the homepage, and there is a link to the article there. So, Paul.
Yeah, if you'll just go there and read that now, we'll wait for you to come back. So I've not got a huge amount to add. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not very nice, but like I just said, you pay your money, you take your choice. One of the biggest problems you can have is that if nobody tells you you're doing something badly, you keep doing it that way. Somebody tells you that's not good enough, you'll keep doing it that way. So there has to be a way for those that are displeased with what they've seen to tell the team that. I mean, I didn't boo, but I've got no problem with those who did doing it.
Okay. Andy?
I have no problem with it whatsoever. At the end of the day, it's universal in all sports, in all leagues. It's it's the universal sound of displeasure. If you're displeasured by something, then you boo. And I didn't boo on Saturday or Sunday, whenever it was. And there's people that were around me that were really going for it in that regards. And it's just one of the things. I don't think it's unacceptable. I don't think it's a problem. I don't think it makes them less of a fan or more of a fan. On the flip side, it's just there. It's what it is.
Okay, Tina, anything to add?
Just that again, I didn't boo. I think it's perfectly acceptable. It's not something that we do every game. It's not something we do regularly. But after the poor run of results that we have had, and the coach calling for a reaction and still not getting one, I think it was high time. And just to add that I wasn't surprised.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, it could be worse. You could be Joe Root. Even when he does well, it sounds like people are booing him.
It was like Bruce Richardson, if we want to give it a Panthers thing.
Yes, true, yes, yeah.
I remember someone saying, "Why were they booing their player? He played brilliant." And he was they were saying Bruce, not boo. But there you go. How easily mistakes can be made. Okay, a question that comes from David Spence, and this is one he actually gave to us in the pub on Sunday after the game. And Andy, I'm going to start with you with this, and it's how good a recruiting policy was signing Chris Lawrence's mates?
Well, on current form, it was probably not the best. But as we've touched on already, we're also missing Chris Lawrence, so is he the sort of the... I don't know. Is either sort of the glue that holds it together in that regard. Like I say, on current form, not great at the moment. But I suppose give it a couple of weeks, perhaps, get Lawrence back in the lineup. Who knows? But obviously, it'll all be hindsight at the end of the year, really. But like I say, currently at the moment, it's not looking great.
Okay, Paul.
It all depends on who his friends are, doesn't it? I mean, isn't
I think he's talking about Jeff Brown and Matt.
Yeah, Carter. I know that, but you probably not. If I'm honest, Brown's okay. Carter, well, he could well be one of the people that Nielsen was talking about when he said, others could have gone. But you don't necessarily know that, when you sign them. But yeah, I think he's probably right.
Okay. Tina?
Well, I'll reiterate this because I did say it on Monday. Yeah, I mean, well, what with Andy says, but perhaps Chris Lawrence is the linchpin. Perhaps they'll start performing when he gets back, but that's possibly a bit tongue-in-cheek. But I believe it was Jeff Brown who came to us with the David Link seal of approval, so I expected better from him, to be honest.
Okay, penultimate question comes from Elaine. She's at HeyBlondie94 on Twitter. Why don't we hang banners of our achievements with pride like other teams? All we have is shirt retirements on show. Andy?
Well, it always gets brought up every now and then, doesn't it? One, when seemingly we're not allowed to put banners up in the arena for whatever reason that the arena has, and to be fair, something that obviously Paul was first brought to my attention is certainly, at the end of the day, for some reason we seem to have this strange sort of newfound ideal that we've only won trophies recently, and that we don't. We look at the intro video. We don't mention any of the previous successes. It's all the last 10 years or the last so many years.
6 years, I think.
Yeah, and I appreciate, but obviously, you don't want to be putting. You don't want an intro video that in 50 years' time, and it's got 5 minutes worth of Challenge Cups and Aladdin Cups and playoffs and stuff like that. You need to tone it down.
The leagues.
But I do find it odd that we don't sort of make more of it. And with the big banner that we have at the back of the room, I'm surprised that they've never done anything to sort of mark our achievements.
Tina?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I understand it, the arena have said, rightly or wrongly, whatever, they've said that anything hung from the rafters needs to be taken down for concerts because it may obstruct the view of some of the boxes. That's up for debate. That's discussion for another day. So the Panthers would have to, I would imagine, pay for man hours for somebody to put all the banners up before every game and take them back down again at the end of the game. And I don't. They obviously, if all of what I've said is true, then the Panthers obviously feel that this is an expense that is not justified. So, that's a decision that they have made. And in terms of the intro, putting them on the intro video, I mean that screen only takes 30 seconds of video at a time. So I don't think it would be practical. Maybe if and when a new super duper board, Jumbotron comes along or whatever, then maybe we could integrate it into there. But as it stands at the moment, it's obviously not viable.
Okay, Paul.
Can I ask you all, before I start? Can I ask you all a one-word question or one-word answer?
Yeah.
Would you like to see banners?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, I wouldn't. Purely because our team can't do anything without having it sponsored. And it wouldn't be the 2000, it wouldn't be the 1989 playoff victory. It'd be the 1989 playoff victory sponsored by McDonald's, sponsored by AJKM, Hockey Barn or whatever. I'm nothing wrong about people sponsoring the club, don't get me wrong, but I think there is a time and place for it. One of the things that irritates me is I went to the National Football Museum once, and they've got a wall of fame with plaques for all the people who were in the wall of fame. They were sponsored. It just feels wrong to me. And so, yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, the whole thing about, it's a multi-purpose arena that, so we can't have banners. I think that's a load of rubbish. It's about money. It's about the fact that Panthers would have to pay for somebody to hoist, to attach the flag to something and hoist it up and take them down if it was need be, week in, week out, and it would be an extra cost that they obviously aren't prepared to pay.
Okay. Right, we've got about 90 seconds left, so the final question, so we're all going to have to be very quick on this one. So Andy, this one's coming to you first. Another one from Colin Basford. It says, should the Panthers be showing the players living it up on the steak night when it should be what happens on the ice that promotes the team and sport? There was a photo on Twitter with them enjoying a steak at Beedham's Butchers last night. So Andy.
Yeah, I don't see what the problem is. The players haven't been performing well, and the team haven't been getting results, but at the end of the day they are also still human beings. It's team bonding. It's a former player, and I suppose it's with JT Beedham is a sponsor. They've put the stuff on. I presume it's completely free of charge to the team and to the players. And the players have had themselves a good night. I don't see what the issue is with that at all.
Okay. Paul, 10 seconds.
We're a club that's driven by sponsors. We tell people to look on a website when we have a sign-in. Yeah, every match day there's half a dozen sponsor tweets about how to get your parking or whatever.
Okay. Tina?
It's all about sponsorship.
Yep, no issues. I mean, if all the team were there, it shows a bit of team unity, which the suspicion is it's that particular part of the team is lacking a little.
Okay, we're very rapidly running out of time, so very quickly I will say thank you very much to Paul Balm.
Thank you.
To Tina Taylor.
TTFN.
And Andy Haywood.
Good night.